One moment in an empty classroom revealed a side of my teacher I never expected. What happened next changed the way I saw everything. Mr. James, our history teacher, had always been a figure of authority in the classroom. He was strict but fair serious, but somehow approachable. I never thought twice about his presence. To me, he was just the teacher who guided us through ancient civilizations and debates about historical events. But that afternoon, something shifted. I was just packing my books into my bag when he called out to me. "Evelyn, could you stay for a moment? I need to talk to you about your essay." I didn't think much of it at first. I was used to staying after class to catch up with teachers. I slung my bag over my shoulder and turned to face him. "Sure, Mr. James. What's up?" He looked up from the papers on his desk, his eyes briefly meeting mine, before returning to the stack of assignments he was reviewing. "I just wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your work lately. You've been putting in a lot of effort, and it shows." A wave of pride hit me. I had always tried to do my best, but hearing it from him, it felt different. It meant something. I smiled, feeling a little shy under his gaze. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying hard." He didn't immediately reply. Instead, he rose from his desk, walking over to where I stood. The distance between us had always felt professional, but now it felt closer, too close. "I know you've been dealing with a lot lately," he continued, his voice lower, as if you were speaking to me in confidence. "School is tough, and I know you've got a lot of pressure on you." I nodded. It was true. Senior year had been a whirlwind of assignments, tests, and trying to figure out what came next after graduation. My mind was never still, and the pressure had been eating away at me. But I hadn't expected him to notice. Mr. James wasn't just my teacher. He was well-distant professional. He had always been a mentor, a figure of authority, but now he seemed different, almost human in a way I wasn't used to. "You know, Evelyn," he said, stepping closer to me, "if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm always here. You've been a bright student, and it's clear you're capable of so much more." There was something in his voice and intensity that made me stop and pay attention. My heart started to beat faster. Something was shifting between us, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Thank you, Mr. James. I'll keep that in mind," I said, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his gaze was lingering. A little too long, his words a little too weighted. He smiled, but it wasn't the usual teacher smile. It was softer, more knowing, like he understood more than just my academic performance. "I mean it, Evelyn. I'm not just talking about your grades. You've got potential. It's in the way you think, the way you carry yourself." I shifted on my feet, uncomfortable. Yet oddly flattered. His words were sincere, but they were laced with something else, something I couldn't quite identify. I cleared my throat, trying to regain composure. "I should probably head out. My mom's expecting me." He nodded, but didn't make any move to leave. There was a pause, an awkward one, where neither of us spoke. The tension in the room thickened. "You know," he said, breaking the silence, "I'm heading out soon, too. Would you like a ride? I'm driving in your direction." A ride? The offer caught me off guard. We had never crossed that boundary. I knew Mr. James was a good teacher, but to offer a ride, it felt too personal. Too out of the ordinary. I hesitated. "I usually walk home." He shrugged casually, but his eyes remained on me, searching. "It's no trouble, it's just on my way. Don't worry about it." Something in his voice was persuasive, and against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing. "Okay, I guess, thanks." We walked out of the classroom together. The hallways were quiet, the usual buzz of students already gone for the day. The air felt still, and I couldn't help but feel like this moment was different from all the others. There was an unspoken shift happening, something beneath the surface I couldn't quite grasp. He led me to his car, and we both got in. The moment we closed the doors, I felt the silence settle between us. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't natural either. His presence, the way he was sitting so close, felt almost intimate in a way I hadn't expected. The drive started off quietly. The usual chatter of a car ride was replaced by the sound of the engine humming in, the occasional click of the turn signal. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, feeling a nervous flutter in my stomach. "So, Evelyn," Mr. James said, breaking the silence again, "how have things been going outside of school? You've been under a lot of stress lately, haven't you?" I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yeah. It's been rough trying to keep up with everything. You know," he glanced over at me, his gaze soft but intense. "I can imagine. You're a bright student, Evelyn. It's hard to juggle everything." I wasn't sure what to say. His attention, the way he was looking at me, was making my heart race. I hadn't expected this. I had always seen him as the teacher, the figure of authority, but now in this quiet car, he seemed so much closer, real vulnerable. Even when we reached my street, I felt a wave of relief. I wasn't sure what I had been expecting, but the air between us felt charged, like something was waiting to happen. But then, just as quickly as it started, it seemed to dissipate. "Here we are," he said, slowing the car to stop in front of my house. "I hope you got something useful out of today's lesson." "Yeah, definitely," I replied, my voice suddenly a little too high-pitched. I opened the door and stepped out. But before I could fully close it, I turned back toward him. "Thanks for the ride." "Mr. James," he smiled, the same soft, knowing smile from earlier. Anytime, Evelyn. As I walked toward my front door, I glanced back over my shoulder. Mr. James hadn't moved. He was sitting in his car watching me. His eyes were still on me, and that same strange feeling of tension lingered in the air, refusing to let go. And just like that, I knew things weren't the same anymore. Something had shifted between us. Something was starting, and I had no idea where it was going to take us. But one thing was for sure. It wasn't going to be just another normal school day anymore. And that was just the beginning. The days that followed felt different. I kept replaying the ride home in my head. Mr. James's words, his gestures, the way he seemed to look at me like I wasn't just another student. It kept me up at night. It wasn't like me to overthink these things. Normally, I could brush off moments like that, but something about him, the way he made me feel seen, was unsettling. I wasn't sure if I liked it or if I was just imagining things. I tried to ignore it at first. After all, it had been a one-time thing, right? Mr. James was just being kind, offering a ride because he was heading in my direction. That's all, nothing more, nothing less, but it didn't feel that way. The next day, I found myself walking to class, heart pounding a little faster than usual. I hoped I could just slip in unnoticed, get through the day and go home without any awkwardness. I didn't want to face him, but there he was, waiting by the classroom door as I walked past, looking straight at me as if he'd been waiting. "Evelyn," he called out, and I froze in my tracks. I tried not to meet his eyes, but his gaze was magnetic. "Good morning, Mr. James," I said, my voice sounding far too high-pitched. He smiled, and it made my stomach flip. "You seem like you're in a hurry today. Everything okay?" I nodded quickly, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just busy," he repeated with an almost knowing look. "You're always so composed, Evelyn. I guess we all have our days." I wanted to tell him it wasn't just a busy day. It was the kind of day where I couldn't escape the strange tension between us. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded again and hurried into class. But even in class, I couldn't focus. My eyes kept drifting toward him. Mr. James was at the front of the room, his back to us as he wrote notes on the board. But it was as if I could still feel his presence, feel his gaze lingering on me from the corner of the room. It was distracting. Every time he asked a question or made a joke, I found myself more attuned to his voice, to the way he smiled at me. Every small interaction felt charged, as though something was lurking just beneath the surface. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at me differently, like he was seeing something I wasn't ready to confront. As the bell rang to signal the end of class, Mr. James dismissed everyone, but called me over as the others filtered out. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a little softer now. "Can you stay back for a second?" I stopped in my tracks, heart pounding in my chest. "Sure, Mr. James," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. The room emptied, leaving us alone in the quiet space. He sat at his desk, motioning for me to come closer. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I walked toward him. "You did well in class today," he said, as if you were making small talk. But his eyes were intense, watching me closely, but I noticed you seemed a little distracted. "Everything okay?" I paused. I didn't want to lie, but I couldn't tell him the truth. I didn't know what the truth was. Was I distracted by his presence? Was it wrong to feel the way I did? "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced by my own words. He studied me for a moment, his gaze steady, then he said, "You know, Evelyn, I've been thinking I see a lot of potential in you. Not just academically," but he paused, his eyes flickering for a second. "But in everything you do." The way he said it, the way he paused just before the words, "in everything you do," made my pulse race. It was like he was trying to say something more, but wasn't sure if he should. "I don't know what you mean," I said, my voice suddenly sounding small. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the desk. There was a faint smile on his lips, but it wasn't the usual teacher smile. This one seemed almost personal. "I think you know exactly what I mean, Evelyn," he said quietly, his tone low and deliberate. "You've been working hard and you've always been focused, but lately you seem distant. Something changed, hasn't it?" I felt a sudden heat in my chest. It was as though he had pierced right through me, seen through the walls I put up. I couldn't speak for a moment. I felt exposed, vulnerable under his gaze. Before I could say anything, the door opened. I quickly looked over my shoulder, relieved to see a classmate in return for something they'd forgot. "Sorry, Mr. James, I left my notebook," the student said, picking up the forgot item from the desk. "Go ahead," Mr. James replied curtly, dismissing them. His eyes met mine for a moment before the student left the room. The air seemed to crackle with the tension that hung between us. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said, as the student disappeared, his voice a little too soft for comfort. I nodded quickly, practically running out of the room as the bell rang. My legs felt shaky, my heart racing in my chest. What was happening as the day passed? I couldn't stop thinking about that moment. The way he looked at me. The way his voice dropped when he spoke. I wasn't used to this kind of attention. I had to talk to him again. I had to get a grip on myself. The next afternoon, I stayed after class again, hoping to talk to him in a more controlled environment. The room was empty except for me, waiting for him to finish his work. He hadn't yet noticed me at the back of the classroom when I walked up to his desk, but when he looked up there was that same glint in his eyes, as if he had been waiting for me to approach. Back for more, Evelyn? He asked with a smirk that made my breath hit. I swallowed hard. I just wanted to finish that assignment, I said, avoiding his eyes. But as I spoke, he moved closer, standing just a few inches from me now. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, the proximity making my heart race. I know you're a dedicated student, he said quietly, leaning in just enough for his voice to feel intimate. But I also know there's more to you than just your grades. I tried to pull away, but there was nowhere to go. The desk behind me kept me from retreating, and I found myself trapped in the space, caught between wanting to run and wanting to stay. His eyes were now fixed on mine, and I could feel the weight of his gaze. Evelyn, you're not just a student to me, he said, his voice so low I could barely hear him. You're someone I care about. I've been watching you for a long time. I wanted to say something, anything to push him away, but the words stuck in my throat. I had never been in this situation before, never felt so unsure of myself. His proximity was overwhelming, and it felt as though I was on the verge of something I wasn't ready for. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing mine in a fleeting touch. Spark that ran through me was electric, and just like that, the tension I have been ignoring for days exploded. The space between us seemed to vanish in an instant. I began, but the words never came. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on anything in class. Every time Mr. James spoke, I felt my heart skip a beat. I knew I shouldn't feel this way. He was my teacher, my mentor. But that moment in the classroom, the brush of his fingers against mine, everything changed. I couldn't ignore the electricity between us, the way our proximity seemed to spark something deeper. It didn't help that every time I walked past him, he gave me that look, half smiling, like he knew something I didn't like. He knew the thoughts that were running wild in my head. It was both thrilling and terrifying. My body responded before I even had the chance to think. One afternoon, I stayed behind after class again. The others had long gone, and the quiet of the classroom felt strangely intimate. Sat at my desk pretending to work on an assignment, but I couldn't concentrate. My thoughts kept drifting to him. What would he say this time? How far would he push? I heard his footsteps behind me, and I felt a flutter in my chest before he even spoke. Evelyn, his voice was low, his tone almost like a whisper. I thought you'd be heading out by now. I looked up, meeting his gaze. There was no going back now, not with the way he was looking at me, like I was the only thing that mattered in that moment. His eyes were darker today, more intense. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating. I was just finishing up, I said, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed me. It was breathless, nervous. You don't need to pretend with me, he said, stepping closer to my desk. His presence seemed to fill the room, closing the gap between us, until there was nothing left but a mere whisper of space. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. I'm not pretending. He didn't say anything for a moment, but his eyes never left mine. There was something there, something I couldn't describe. It wasn't just a teacher's attention anymore. It was something more. His hand brushed against the back of my chair, sending a shiver through me. The air between us felt charged, with a tension that could snap at any moment. I don't want you to feel like you have to keep your distance, he murmured. You don't have to hide from me. His words were soft, but there was something undeniably powerful in the way he said them. They made my heart race, my stomach tight. I didn't know if I should move closer or run away. My body seemed to make the decision for me. When I stood up slowly without thinking, I looked at him, feeling an undeniable pull between us. It wasn't just the physical closeness. It was the way he made me feel, like I was the only person in the room who mattered. Evelyn, he said again, his voice rougher this time, as though he was struggling to keep his composure. There's something about you. I could feel my breath hitch. Something about that phrase, the way he said it, made my knees feel weak. It wasn't just the fact that he was a teacher. It was the way he looked at me, like he saw me, not just the student, but me, everything I was. All at once I took a step closer. Not sure what I was doing, but unable to stop myself. He didn't move away. Instead, he closed the distance, his eyes never leaving mine. His breath was warm against my skin, and I could feel the heat radiating from him. His hand reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. The simple gesture made my heart race even faster. You don't know what you do to me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to respond. Everything in my body was telling me to step back, but my mind was clouded. His touch, his words, it was all too much, and yet it was exactly what I needed. Before I could think any further, he did something I wasn't expecting. He leaned in just inches from my face. I could feel the heat of his breath, the intensity of his gaze. And then, without any warning, his lips were on mine. It wasn't a passionate kiss. Not at first. It was slow, tentative, as if he was waiting for me to pull away. But I didn't want to. The moment his lips touched mine, I felt like the world around me had disappeared. It was just him, just the two of us. Suspended in time, his hand found its way to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, and my body responded in ways I couldn't explain. My head was spinning, and every nerve in my body was alive with sensation. I knew this was wrong, but in that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. When he finally pulled away, I was breathless. My lips still tingled from the kiss, and I felt an overwhelming sense of both guilt and desire flood through me. Evelyn, he said, his voice rough, Almost unrecognizable. I shouldn't have done that. But I couldn't help it. I nodded, still dazed, unable to form words. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to pull away, to tell him that this was wrong. The other part of me, the part that was already lost more, he seemed to sense the confusion in me. I'm not going to push you, Evelyn, he said softly, his thumb brushing my cheek. But I can't ignore what's between us. You feel it too, don't you? I closed my eyes, trying to study my breathing. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to deny it, to say that I didn't feel the same way. But I couldn't lie to myself. I felt it. I don't know what this is, I whispered. But I can't stop thinking about it. He didn't respond immediately, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He stepped back slightly, giving me space, though his gaze never wavered. Maybe we shouldn't do this, he said after a long pause. Maybe we should just walk away before we make things more complicated. I stared at him, unsure of what to do. My heart was racing, and my mind was spinning with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. I didn't know if I should run or if I should stay and explore, whatever this was. I don't know if I can walk away, I said, my voice trembling. I don't think I want to. The words hung in the air between us, thick with tension. We stood there for a long moment, just staring at each other. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in this charged silence. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I didn't know how we could continue without crossing a line. We couldn't uncross. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over, and it might never be. The days after that kiss were torture. Every morning I woke up with the taste of him lingering on my lips, the memory of his touch still burning against my skin. It wasn't just the kiss that haunted me. It was everything that came after. The silence between us. The unspoken words. The moments where I couldn't quite tell if we were heading towards something dangerous, or if it was all just a fleeting mistake. Each time I walked into the classroom, I tried to act normal, but normal felt like a distant memory. Mr. James seemed to be in a constant state of restraint, as if he was holding himself back from saying or doing something that could change everything. I hated the way he made me feel, but at the same time I couldn't stop craving more. The attraction was undeniable. The way he looked at me when he thought no one else was watching. The way his voice dropped just a little when he spoke to me. He wasn't just my teacher anymore, he was something else. It was the quiet moments that got to me the most. When we were alone, the rest of the class long gone, and we stood there in the silence, the tension thick in the air between us. Every glance, every word felt like it carried weight. My heart would race whenever he came close, and my skin would prickle, with the knowledge that we were playing a dangerous game. But I couldn't stop myself. I wanted him. I wanted to know what more there was between us, even if it meant risking everything. One afternoon it happened again. I stayed after class like I had every day since that kiss, to finish up some last-minute work. I could tell he was trying to act normal, distant, professional, but I could feel the shift. It was in the way his eyes lingered on me when I wasn't looking, in the way he adjusted his tie like he was trying to study himself. There was no way we could go back to how things were before Evelyn. He called my name softly as I gathered my papers, the sound of my name on his lips sending a jolt through me. Stay for a minute, I turned. Meeting his eyes, he was standing by his desk, his hand resting on the surface, like he was trying to gather the courage to say something. My heart sped up knowing exactly what this was. The past few days have been full of glances and silences, but I knew we couldn't keep pretending like nothing had happened. Of course, I said, walking toward him. My voice sounded steady, but inside I was anything but. He didn't say anything at first. Instead, he just watched me, as if he were trying to figure out how to approach me. Then in one swift motion, he reached for my hand, pulling me gently closer. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said, his voice low and strained. I can't keep pretending like nothing happened between us. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't pull away. I should have told him that this was wrong, that I needed to leave. But the way he held my hand, the way his fingers tightened just slightly, it made everything feel real. Too real, I don't want to pretend. I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't think I can anymore. He moved closer, his other hand coming up to touch my cheek, the warmth of his palm sending a wave of heat through me. I closed my eyes, letting myself feel the intensity of the moment. I never meant to put you in this position, he said quietly, his thumb brushing over my skin. But I can't ignore this, not anymore. I opened my eyes looking up at him, my heart pounding in my chest. What are we doing, Mr. James? I asked, my voice shaky. What is this? I don't know, he replied honestly, but I can't walk away from it. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the words he was about to say, but I needed to understand what this was. What it meant for us. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he leaned down, capturing my lips with his in a kiss that felt different. This time it wasn't tentative or slow like before. It was desperate, urgent, like he couldn't hold back anymore. I kissed him back without hesitation, my hands moving to his chest, pulling him closer, as if I could erase all the distance that had existed between us. The kiss deepened, and I felt everything around me fade away. There was no classroom, no rules. There was only him and me, and the overwhelming pull between us. He broke the kiss first, his breath coming in quick gasps. His forehead rested against mine, as we both tried to regain some semblance of control. I want you, Evelyn, he said, his voice hoarse. I can't stop thinking about you. His words sent a wave of heat rushing through me. I had been wanting him too, but hearing him say it, hearing him admit it was like a confession I wasn't prepared for. I wanted to say something, but all I could do was look at him, unsure of where this was leading. I can't do this, I whispered. Pulling back slightly, my mind was a blur, torn between what I wanted and what I knew was right. His expression softened, but there was a hint of something deeper behind his eyes. You don't have to decide now, he said, but I can't promise I'll be able to hold back much longer. Evelyn, the tension between us was thick, suffocating. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to respond. Everything inside of me screamed to pull away, but my body was betraying me. Every inch of me was drawn to him. Every moment with him felt like a burning meat I couldn't ignore. But I knew what we were doing was wrong. It was dangerous, and if we didn't stop now, I didn't know how we'd ever get out of it. I need to go, I said, my voice breaking slightly as I stepped back, my body trembling with the weight of the decision I was making. I can't do this. He didn't stop me as I grabbed my things and hurried to the door. I could hear him call my name softly, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I made it out of the classroom, but my legs felt weak, my head spinning with the chaos of everything that had just happened. I didn't know what we had just started, but I knew it was a path I couldn't walk back from. I couldn't undo what had happened between us. And as I walked down the empty hallway, the weight of that realization settled in. I'd crossed a line there was no going back. I walked out of the classroom in a daze, my steps unsteady, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. The moment I had just shared with Mr. James kept replaying in my head, the kiss, the intensity of his touch, the way he had looked at me, as though he could see right through my walls. It all felt like a dream, a dangerous dream that I couldn't shake. But I knew I had to push it out of my mind, to move forward and pretend like nothing had changed. But how could I go back to the way things were, when everything between us felt so different? Now I made my way home. But even in the quiet of my room, I couldn't escape the weight of what had happened. I wanted to forget, but the truth was, I didn't want to forget. Part of me had been longing for this. For the connection, for the attention, even if it was wrong. But the other part of me, the part that still remembered the lines that should never be crossed, felt the guilt creeping in, reminding me of what I stood to lose. There was no way to go back now. No way to unfeel what had been felt.